doing it live once ever. Like her experience was just going in the present, wasn't it? It was pure instinct. By the way, the question I want to ask was this. There's a bigger meta question I have for you, which is, obviously, this would have been one of the banger finals that people predict for the main final anyway, GenG against T1. Maybe we'll get to see it twice even. My question is this. After that KT T1 series, do you have any concerns that actually GenG might be able to out macro T1?
Define concerns.
Seems like it should be on the table, right?
I mean, that makes it seem like I'm biased towards T1, when in fact I'm biased towards GenG.
Okay, yeah.
You have any thoughts on the matchup, Ox?
Yeah, I feel like GenG looked. I mean, there's like we had that mistake from Peanut on the Elder, but other than that, I think they've looked really solid in the last couple of weeks, and I think KT have kind of made T1 look vulnerable. And I think there's definitely opportunity to punish that. I do think that. I think that. Sorry, I've lost track of my point.
Okay.
I do think that.
How can GenG punish T1?
Yeah, I think one of the things.
Macro them.
Yeah, if they can out macro them, I think one of the concerns I have for GenG is the fact that I think Keen Zeus was like a much more comfortable matchup. I think top lane might be like a big concern. I could see T1 just being too good on an individual level across lanes where like the macro doesn't get an opportunity to necessarily play out. I think that's something I have a concern with, even though I think that like oftentimes how GenG play out the later stage of the game can often be better than T1. I think T1's setup and how they play around fights is really good, and their early game setups are really effective. But I think if GenG can find a way to navigate like top lane, for example, then that could potentially set them up to be in a good position later on. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I think as well, like as much as the KT T1 series, I think with series like this, especially with a team like T1, sometimes you have situations where you're like, oh, T1 got exposed, right? But I think it's also like a positive for T1, because oftentimes when teams aren't really challenged, like they can end up going and not being aware of their weaknesses, and sometimes having fake data on like what they think is good or what they think is effective. And I think like challenges like this, if you're a team who are good at developing from them, then can often be a positive. Because I think if KT play against T1 again, and like say that's the finals, I don't think it'll be as close as it was this time. I think T1 should come out stronger and as having learned from this. But I guess we'll see.
I mean, by the way, that's why I love having double elim in LCK. I always wanted to know what would happen when you run some of these series back. Whereas if this was the old days of the gauntlet, like that'd just be it. Like, see you, KT. You had a great chance, but that's it. Bye.
I mean, I wish we had seen D+ instead of Hanwha Life.
That's true.
At least in the double elimination, because it just feels like KT's going to destroy them, and then we'll have the top three.
The joke is, Monty, this is exactly why it's a perfect moment, though. Why, if you ever went back and watched all of our coverage of Worlds, you would just think we're haters. You would just think, why are they hating on this fucking this DRX team that they're so plucky, like they're coming up with crazy counters, they're trying their best, they're overcoming deficits. Here's why: because if they hadn't have won that game 5, then what we would actually have thought was that could have been GenG against T1. That could have been Damwon against T1. That could have been EDG against T1. And so the worst thing about, we've always said this about underdog upsets. I know that it's exciting. Everyone likes novelty in the moment. It's something, I never thought that was possible. Like everyone came and think this is 3-1 or 3-0 easy. So the idea, it's even possible they could have lost. But you don't like it when it then means, like in this case with the D+ example, when the upset happens, then Hanwha Life now has to live up to what D+ could have done against those teams. And unfortunately,
exactly.
They not only didn't, but just ask my mate Viper, he's fully aware they can't. They couldn't have won those series. Bro, when you watch that GenG one, that was like that shit where your little brother can't reach you and you're just holding his head back, like just swinging like that underneath. And you're just doing that anytime you want. Like, he couldn't do anything. Like Viper was just like, can I please play League of Legends?
I think
he got one chance.
In game 3, they let them have like one shot
Yeah, exactly,
at them while
yeah.
they like clowned around for a minute, and then they were like, well, there was your shot, guys. Now,
yeah, they were like,
back to destroying you.
It wouldn't be sporting to just 3-0 you. You know what, Viper, you can have one game of League of Legends, right? Are you finished now? Right, close it down. Shut it down. Where's D+? I want them in that bracket. Exactly. And also, they could have just improved think how many weeks it'll be as we go through the lower bracket,
So I think what's interesting about GenG is that they play more of these split push style compositions, and they have been focusing on different champion pools. So first off, obviously, like they've been playing through Paze a lot. I think Paze was arguably like the MVP of that Hanwha Life series. Zeri is a very high priority pick for them because the similarities between Pays and Ruler are pretty shocking. If you watch Ruler on JDG right now, it's the same shit. You can't let him have the Zeri because he will win the lane, even in lane matchups he shouldn't be winning, dominate, and then scale even quicker than he should. As for the other aspects of this team, like Thorin, he did play a game of Jace, but otherwise was really just blind picking Cassante and doing well in all those matchups. And if Thorin's
pick kind nowadays,
opt into Cassante or Gnar picks in the top side, then that's something I think can work for GenG.
That's a good idea.
Chovy's still incredibly lane dominant and has a variety of these picks that he plays that no one else really debuts, and we got to see that again. Now, I do think Zeka is quite a bad mid Gragas player, so this is not indicative of what could possibly happen with Faker in this matchup. But again, we got to see Chovy, and he's picking a first strike LeBlanc, and LeBlanc has been one of his lane bullies that he's kind of gone back to, and whether he's running it first strike or electrocute or airy, sometimes he Q maxes just to really like abuse certain melee matchups. He's really able to keep a lot of pressure and escapability on that mid lane. So there's also the factor that Peanut and Owner don't really have a lot of jungle pool overlap, and we're seeing a lot of jungle bans at this point in time. We saw the Maokai pretty consistently banned by Hanwha Life during that series. Now, nobody else is playing Maokai ever since the nerfs, and he is playing it tank now, Peanut. So Peanut, he's threatening on Sejuani, Wukong, Maokai, and Vi, and you can't ban all of those. Meanwhile, on the side of T1, Owner, as we know, would much rather be playing probably Lee Sin or Elise.
Yep.
So it really is a very different style of play that we're going to see evolving between GenG and T1. Like, there's a world where the Ari Lissandra matchup becomes really interesting in a best of 5, right? Because we both know that these players like to run, Faker and Chovy like to run these champions. We've seen the depth of Chovy's champion pool. He'll play Cassante mid. One of the reasons why Cassante is such a valuable pick for GenG is because it's it's a flex pick for them. They'll run it.
It's mad the way he has that.
Matchups.
Like it's so I'll never understand that about Chovy, especially because he's such like a monster CS player normally. It's like, I don't know if you know this, Monty, but one of the greatest snooker players of all time, Ronnie O'Sullivan, who's actually still like a world champion now. The way he's so talented, even though I don't think he's naturally ambidextrous, he just learned also, Monty, to play snooker with his other hand, and actually in real matches does shots with his other hand and can make them like quite consistently, which is insanely rare for like a snooker player. Like Chovy has some of that where like for some reason, like, and Ronnie O'Sullivan in interviews used to describe like his other hand as like his mistress. It's like, he should stay faithful to the hand that actually like he's the best with, but every now and then he has to like veer away and have fun, and take a crazy shot. Why has Chovy always had this weird thing where he wants to play like fucking tanks and bruisers mid? What is that about? Like, bro, you're already cracked as fuck on all the actual traditional mid champions. Like, why do you need to play some weird bruiser in the mid or some melee champion? Like, what the fuck is this, bro? Just stick with your strength. Why is all geniuses got to have some weird streak in them like that, where they just do some bizarre shit? But I agree though, mate. Basically what you're saying, if you're a casual fan, is one thing that will make this series great is not only stylistically do the teams play differently, but their draft and actual what their preferences are totally play to those stylistic differences. And so as a result, in the draft, actually, it's not going to be like we're fighting for the same champions. And so it's more like, which of yours do I eliminate? And you're still going to get one of your comps anyway, and I'm going to get one of my comps anyway. And essentially we're trying to decide what are just the strengths. We're not even battling for the same picks that much, probably.
Yeah, and that's what I think is going to be fascinating, especially
that should be great.
Because,
yeah,
we know that T1 loves to kind of, make these early game bot movements and like go down there, get the dive done, try and get Gumayushi and carry ahead, control early Drakes. This is, either that or play diving mid with Gragas and Lee Sin and play these aggressive matchups. I don't think that's going to be an option versus Chovy. And I think that, Peanut, he doesn't have the hands that Owner does, but he does have very good reads on game states, and he does cover lanes very well. And he does play kind of better scaling junglers, arguably. So this is a super, super interesting matchup. And it really could have gone either way the last time these two teams played. And for whatever reason, probably, possibly because of some of the item changes, we are seeing fewer enchanters, and then also the 80 carries in the support position. Now, carry is still obviously going to be extremely threatening on picks like Nautilus and Thresh. We've seen how amazing he can be on those. But if they're going to play Thresh, then they're probably going to play Aphelios or Jinx. If they, and that means, like, are we going to see Doran on a Malphite in the top lane? That's another option that could come through. So I really like GenG right now. I think they're in extremely good form. And there's just so many ways for Chovy to be successful in the mid lane, whether that, like we said, is playing the Cassante mid. What other champions have we seen that are a little bit weird? I mean, he's even played Corki this split, right?
Yep.
He's played
He always has a
Aurelia.
few.
He's played Aurelia. He's played Yone fantastically well. And there's still obviously the Talia that can come through also. So it's hard to pin him down in a lot.
By the way, I have a question as a sidebar. Why is it that we're all just cool with that? Where we just go, and of course, Peanut, not really a hands jungler anymore. Like, what happened? He used to be a mega mechanically skilled jungler. Is he on some like fucking shit where it's like, oh, I used to be an amazing Olaf until I took a spear to the knee. Like, what happened? Like, he's already, remember, he's not like 58 or something, guys. Like, is it like some fucking RPG and on his heads up display? He's just done so many mechanical outplays on Lee Sin. Like, the hands are at like 11%. It's like the bar is like flashing red, like regenerate hands, regenerate, but he has to just keep playing League. Why? Why is his hands just gone? I don't buy that, Monty. I think people just convince themselves of that, because I know obviously mechanics evolve and it's not like everyone can do the insect kick now and all that jazz, but like that's one of those weird things, because Jankos has done the same thing. They've just decided in their head they're not the players who play those champions, and they're not even going to try to. And look, I get it that their strength is like experience and read the map, fill for people, like you say, cover. But like, you'd think they'd sort of keep it going on the side a bit, just as a threat every now and then. Because the problem now is, like you're saying, you do have no threat at all that Peanut will pick those champions. You're not even worried. In fact, he wants to go to those or three ones that he likes.
He does prioritize the Elise. He's 3-1 on Elise, and he actually draws quite a few Elise bans. That has been one of the signature champions of his entire career. He's played a couple games on Lee Sin. He just isn't quite as good at these champions as like Oner is, and I don't think they fit the real emphasis of GenG as a team either. Like,
sure.
GenG doesn't necessarily need a lot of early aggressive jungler action. Pays and Delight have been good in lane, but it's mostly about covering for them while they like crash a wave or something like that. But for the most part, they're playing pretty back in their lane because they're playing more for scaling. Chovy can be lane dominant. The advantage of Chovy is that Chovy is so good at laning in the 1v1 that it gives you room to play tank and scaling tanky junglers that maybe other mid laners might need more help from their jungler than Chovy does. Chovy can achieve excellent results doing that, and that gives Peanut the opportunity to play these really annoying late game junglers like Maokai and Sejuani that have a lot bigger effect on game state come 25 minutes than an Elise does. So it may just be part of the way the team is structured. Like, they may have realized this about their own strengths.
I mean, I will say GenG does look like a very well-coached team. I mean, obviously, we've already done this narrative, but just the fact that they could lose those players and then reinvent their style, they'd still be really, really good, probably still the best at macro.
Yeah. I mean, it goes to show that, Score is killing it, and Peanut and Chovy and Doran, as the veteran voices of the team, particularly Peanut, are really doing a good job of shot calling within the game. And they've really unlocked Pays. And I think what's exciting about Pays is that he's kind of unquestionably the best rookie in the LCK. And there's going to be a very interesting conversation after we see both LCK and LPL playoffs as to whether it is Leave or Pays that is the best rookie in the world in 2023. They've both been doing absolutely amazingly. I think I'd probably tip it to Pays at this point in time, but EDG has been shockingly good, and a lot of that is because Leave has massively overperformed expectations.
Oh, for sure.
What do you talk about now? I mean, I'm still high. My point is, I'm still high on GenG, and Hanwha Life was easily the worst team, but the games that GenG wasn't playing like silly shit, like Pantheon support with Ashe AD carry into Blitzcrank, which was just fantastically bad. When they were already up 2-0, and Korean teams do this. They'll run something experimental if they're highly confident that they're going to win. They went right back to clapping Hanwha Life in game 3 of the series. It wasn't even close. It was very, very clean. This matchup between T1 and GenG, I think it is possible for T1 to lose this matchup in the current meta. It's rough. Like,
here's why I need GenG to go to MSI, Monty. Because there's someone like, this is like a nightmare at this point in time. So I've watched Knight for all these years, and I've just seen him go to like that one whack semi of Worlds, and it was just play against JDG, not Suning rather, and just lose. It's LPL team. Then if you go back with Trophy, he's gone to all these Worlds, goes to the playoffs, just plays other Korean teams, goes home. Like, can I please just see these fucking guys play in a series? In a national, like, I come from Counter-Strike, I would have seen this by now. It would eventually have happened. Like, can I please just see Knight against Trophy in a best of 5? Can I have that, please? They've only both been in position, by the way, for about fucking 4 straight years. Once ever in my life, can I watch that series, please? I'm not asking too much, Emma.
I mean, bummer that Top Esports is underperforming so thoroughly, because that also means that, yet again, we will likely be denied.
We are going to, I think,
mate. Rookie. Fuck my life.
They look like frauds. Probably are going to be denied it. It sucks, doesn't it? There's just certain players, just like, it's almost like they're magnets, but it's the opposite polarities. They're just pushing apart. They can never meet. It's ridiculous, isn't it? We'll just find out later, like, Knight and Chovy just are the same person with like a fucking, like, you know, glasses or something like that. That's going to have to be something like that, isn't it? Like, what's going on? Has anyone ever seen these guys in the room at the same time? This is ridiculous. The joke is, like, what he does is this, Monty. This is how you know it is the true, like, Clark Kent. Because you know the whole premise, it's actually explained at the end of one of those Tarantino movies, Kill Bill, that in a fucked up way, you can view Superman actually as like a condescending view of how an alien would see humans. Because when he disguises himself, look at how pathetic and servile and he has just a coward, you know, a fool, a bore, like a buffoon. That's who he decides to mask himself as, so he can fit in, Monty, into society instead of being Superman, like essentially like a godlike fucking like Apollonian character who embodies the spirit of the sun and vitality, you know. So like basically in that scenario, yeah, it's mental, mate. It's just ridiculous. So I think here's the analogy. Chovy, his disguise in the LCK, he's just a boring LCK play. Just gets all the CS, just plays like totally. Obviously, if the jungle helps him, he helps. Otherwise, just CS's side lanes. Then he goes to the LPL. He's only team fighting, mate. He's just crazy team fight. That's his wild side he lets out when he gets off the. That's when he takes off the fucking mask, mate. And he just unleashes his side. That's why you've never seen them, because it's the same person. So he has to play. The problem is this, guys. He has to play both sides of the bracket every Worlds. So obviously he has to go out of one side really early so he can put his efforts on the other side. I've cracked it. There we go. I got there in the end. I got there in the end. I knew I was not going there.
But yeah, I think with this bracket, like at least in LPL, I would be excited to see JDG and EDG, possibly, you know, LNG is an outside shot heading to MSI. I don't really know who I want from Korea to go. Like, obviously the matchup, like the matchups between T1, GenG, JDG, and EDG would all be fascinating because they're all extremely different teams from one another. I do think the Korean teams are a cut above the Chinese teams at the moment from watching this gameplay. But the thing about the LPL is you never really know until LPL playoffs, because they play so many fucking games and so many of the games are just trash versus bad teams, that teams really don't put all of their effort into the regular season. So we'll see if JDG can tighten things up in their playoff run. We're not going to get to see them play until, you know, a couple weeks from now. So they also have a lot of time to prepare and kind of ramp up into that form. And with the star power on that roster, you'd think they would be fiercely competitive at an international event.
The problem I have is this: for LCK, I'm torn, because in the LCK bracket, I love seeing KT do these upsets and cause these crazy matches. But I actually feel like if they ended up representing Korea, there's also a world where they could just mega shit the bed. It just looks so stupid in some BO5. You know?
I don't think so with this KT roster. I really don't. And the reason is because it's because of the dimensionalization that we've seen since halfway through the second round robin. I've talked about this a lot, but those defeats that they suffered, what was it in? Let me look. Week 5. It was the week that they got completely bodied by T1 and D+. No, it was week 6, I believe. Yeah, it was week 6
before they did the big streak. Yeah,
it was week 6. And they were really exposed for being somewhat one-dimensional, and then they came back. They rallied back from that week, and then the very next week they started showing off all these pick compositions that they hadn't played before. And I think the scary thing about KT's pick comps is they're not the same as what T1 does with a pick composition. Like T1 is the pick composition that comes in off the screen, like it's like a combination of pick and poke. The thing about KT is that they will get expansive vision of an area. And then what they'll do is they will pick a bunch of champions with single target CC. So it'll be the Twisted Fate. It will be the Jax. It will be the Vi. These types of picks. And then, with a support that can lock somebody down, right? Even 80 carries that can provide some single target CC, right? Like a Varus. And we saw this in the T1 series, but if you think you are fighting them in a front to back team fight, they will find 1 point of CC on your front line, and then they will 100-0 you. Like we saw this with Zeus's Gnar, where he was just standing in the front line about to turn Mega Gnar. He got hit by 1 piece of CC, and by the time the CC was over, he was just fucking dead. And then it's just like, oh, I guess we have a 5v4 now. So it's about, with KT, it's about their decisiveness and ability to chain CC from one of their players into the next CC that player has, and everybody focusing that guy down instantly. And I think that style would be extraordinarily punishing on the West, because you cannot fuck up your spacing one time. And they're able to do this to T1. They're able to win games against T1 by doing this. That's why, they won all the TF games.
Oh, they could have won the series for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I have a question though. Do you not have any concerns about Cuzz?
No, not particularly. I don't. Dom touched on this a lot in Power Spike, that he thought Cuzz was really unfortunate. It was unfortunate the fans decided to blame Cuzz for Game 5 of that series. You have to remember that. So Cuzz had some bad moments, but those bad moments were almost always linked to his teammates also fucking up at the same time. Like, yeah, he went into try and steal the last Baron, and that was dumb, but his teammates also shouldn't have been in base. Like Chovy or Keen and BDD should not have been in the base trying to defend. They should have been trying to play the Baron. So that was just two messed up calls in a row. I think Cuzz did have a pretty strong early game. We also have to remember that for whatever reason, Cuzz was on Xin Zhao that game. And part of that was there were a bunch of jungle bans, and T1 first picked Wukong on blue side to deny Cuzz. They were very specifically targeting Cuzz. They banned the Vi, they banned the Sejuani. We saw the Elise and Lee Sin banned by KT. So we're now at the 6th priority jungler. And I think Dom made a good point where that Lilia would probably be a lot better with this composition, and I agree with that analysis. I would have, but I don't know if Cuzz really plays Lilia. It's not something that he has shown a lot of this season. So where does Cuzz go after that, right? Like, he's played a few games of Viego, but you have to remember that this split, here's his champion pool. Wukong, 17 games. Sejuani, 14 games. Vi, 9 games. Every other jungler he has is 3 games or fewer. They are Viego, Xin Zhao, Elise, Maokai, Zac, and Lee Sin. He wasn't even playing Maokai when Maokai was arguably the strongest pick within the meta. So
maybe okay, but the problem with that is, doesn't that imply there are going to be problems with Cuzz? He's one-dimensional.
If you try and ban him out, potentially. But here's the other question. Here's the other question that we have to answer. The last time we saw KT lose, the very next week, they came back with an entirely different style of play. Right? And it was, before that, he was suffering because he was only really playing Wukong, and Sejuani was his scariest champ by a long shot. It was banned. Then they started coming up with these pick comps with Vi and Viego. So I guess Wolf's point on our show about KT was that this was a very teachable moment from KT. KT has learned quickly off of their mistakes, and I don't think they're going to play a pick comp that badly again. And I do wonder if they start thinking about changing Cuzz's champion priority, because that is what happened last time they lost. It's an interesting question.
Just seems like something that people could also replicate in terms of Bando. So I'll be interested to see if people try and target him at least.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely was targeted, and by the end of that T1 series, but I don't think it was because his Xin Zhao was bad. He played it in the Live Sandbox series as well. I don't think it's because his Xin Zhao was bad. I think that at 54 minutes into this game, that Xin Zhao is fucking useless and will look useless no matter who's playing it. That's what I think. I think he's just bad in the ultra late game state.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.